Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 4. Today we're joined by Predator Quest Pro staff member Jerry Lannen, and he'll be sharing predator hunting tips that may help you with your QDM. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell. You're listening to episode number 4, where today we'll talk with Jerry Lannen from Predator Quest Pro staff. Looking forward to that conversation today. I don't have a whole lot of back history or background information or knowledge in general about predator hunting, so selfishly I've been kind of looking forward to this. But before we dive into that, I'm joined as always with my esteemed colleague, Phil Marchek. How's it going, Phil?
It's going well. You're full of compliments this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you know, whenever when you've been having beverages poolside as frequently as I have, the compliments begin to flow a little bit more freely. I don't know if it's the social lubricant that I've been applying heavily over the past few days of my vacation, or if you're just that swell of a guy.
I hope it's kind of both. And speaking of lubricant, I hope you're keeping a sunscreen on.
Yeah, No, I haven't, but
yes, no.
I haven't learned my lesson from my run-in over the Memorial Day weekend, but I have managed to stay out of the sun to a degree. For obviously those who are listening don't know, but I'm on vacation now. I'm coming to you live and hot from North Carolina, spending a couple days at my dad's, and then the wife and I and the kiddo will be headed to Asheville, North Carolina for a couple days in the mountains. But he's got a pool, and so we just kind of hang out by the pool, and he's got a block target, so I shoot a fair amount of archery while I'm here. And he just put on the back of his house a nice overhang. I think it's called a pergola, maybe is what it's called.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. He just put one of those on this past year, so it makes a nice canopy for getting out of the heat. But the heat index, I think the day we got here was like 111.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was on vacation, but I spent most of that day sitting in the air conditioning, half passed out on the couch.
I doubt it was just because of the heat.
Yeah, well, that was just I had a long travel. I traveled for work on Tuesday.
Yeah,
I was in Rochester, yeah, and then Wednesday I had all day meetings, and then I flew from Rochester back to Philly, and then we jumped in the car like as soon as I got back in town off my flight around 8, and jumped in the car and drove most of the way to North Carolina, and then had to stay over at a hotel, and then drove the rest of the way Thursday morning. So it was a long couple days of travel, but we're here to talk deer in hunting today. We're going to dive into some predator hunting today, so I'm super interested in that. But before we jump into all that, is there any late breaking news on the Marchek side of things?
Yeah, so you and I had talked a little bit about this earlier in the week, but a buddy of mine from back home who goes hunting on the same land as I do, he reported to me he went to go to clear out some some trails, some shooting lanes, and we had two of our lock-on stands stolen.
Oh man!
And I use stolen because I doubt that the deer. The whole opposable thumb thing and lack thereof, I doubt that they're taking them down. And, there have been a couple run-ins, I think, over the past, 10, 15 years with some rowdy guests from up the road. But, so that's really disheartening. I mean...
it's hard to have nice things sometimes anymore these days.
I think it really comes down to the fact that it's I don't want to say 50-50, but as much as I want to blame the perpetrators who took it, we should probably this year, if we grab a couple other stands, take them down in the off season. It's unfortunate because it's convenient. We like to leave them there, and it just makes it easier for us. When the next season comes around to just, they're already there and established. But, I think we just got to put in a little extra work, take them down, store them, and doing a little bit more extra work in the preseason. So it's unfortunate. But
Yeah, I mean, we've had pretty good luck with the exception of me thinking that the one ladder stand may have gotten stolen this year, but we've left a lot of them up. We'll take them down and just kind of check them out and then put them right back up and make sure there's nothing from a safety perspective that's going to go wrong with them. But ours usually stay up for the most part. My late breaking news this week was, been planning the trip to Ohio, and I think as I mentioned on the last time we chatted, I got my license. I'm kind of all good to go. I've been scoping a couple spots, and then my friend Tate, is going to be going with me, and then you may be going as well if we kind of figure out what the timing is and so forth.
Yes, sir.
But the one guy that we were planning to go with is a friend of Tate's, and he works with him, and that was kind of the plan last year because his buddy Eric has a spot that he goes to year after year after year. He has some success out there. And he kind of knows the spot really well. I don't know exactly how long he's been going to the same spot, but I want to say it's probably been 7 to 10 years. He's been kind of hunting the same area. And we were planning to go with him because he really knows that area, and he was basically like, I can put us on deer when we get out there pretty easily, or at least get us in the right spots, which would make it, a lot easier going out on a DIY hunt if you have someone who's had some success there, but also some familiarity just with the area in general. But he had a really bad accident at work right after the new year, where he lost a limb, actually, which don't want to be a big downer here. It's more uplifting, I promise, here in a couple seconds.
Just wait for it.
Yeah, we got to wait for it. So Tate and I, of course, talked, and we weren't even going to mention anything about hunting to him because, of his accident, and, he was going to have some serious rehab and stuff like that, coming up, and was just kind of considering like this hunting season for him would probably be a wash for the most part. Yeah. But obviously that's the least important thing going on. It's, he made it through the accident, he's good spirits, and he's one of those just tough country boys where he's like, I'm going to be all right. Take what you got to take. We'll move on. So I got a really awesome phone call from Tate earlier this week where he said, he and I were talking about going out and doing a scout/hunt because I think Ohio's season opens on the 24th of September.
Okay.
And instead of making a separate trip out where we were going to just basically scout and then lose that day or lose that trip essentially like in late August or early September, we were both kind of like, well, why don't we just go out and do a scout/hunt trip? That way at least, we can kind of scout in the morning a little bit, find a place to set up on the evening, set up, do it the second day, and just kind of, that way we're not wasting the trip out.
Yeah. And
Tate calls me this week and says, hey, Eric got a hold of me and basically said, hey, you still down for Ohio this year? He's like, yeah, and I got a buddy who's ready to go. He's like, all right. He's like, well, let's go out the first week of September. I want to go out and scout and start getting stuff together. He's like, because I'm going this year.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I was excited for a couple reasons. One, because, the dude had a really bad accident, and he's, he's just going to kind of power through. And, it seems as though his rehab and all that stuff is going really well, and he's learning to use his prosthetic well and stuff like that. So it seems like he's going to give it a go, which is good in itself.
So is he rocking a crossbow then?
No. His accident was to a lower limb. So he's still able to pull back his compound and stuff like that. Yes, the challenge is just like the terrain and getting used to using that lower limb prosthetic to be able to feel the terrain, so he's not falling over. Hopefully. But he's a tough old boy, so he'll make it through. He just said, he's like, I might just be a little slower than usual. He's like, you might just have to hold up for me.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's nothing better to heal something like that than motivation. He's got something to aim for, something to gun for, so that's great.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the flip side of that, the second part, which is obviously way low on the scale of awesome, is that we should be able to get into an area much more quickly, with him, with us, because he just knows the area that we're going to be going to really, really well. So that's the awesome. Area that I've been kind of looking at may not be the area that we go to, because I've kind of defaulted to him since he has the information out there. But I'm supposed to talk to him this week and just kind of set up some plans for when we want to get out there and where we might want to go, and if the areas that I had been kind of looking at, how close are they to like the areas that he's hunted in the past, because we might be able to kind of make a trip out and kind of hit the areas that he's familiar with quickly, and then maybe shoot off to the areas that I've kind of pinpointed on the map. But yeah, so all good things. But that's
nice.
I'm really enjoying vacation at this point, but I'm itching to get back, because I think we're going to head back to the farm, because I've not looked at a camera since the beginning of July, and the one on the mountain I haven't looked at, or what it was Memorial Day weekend was the last time I looked.
Are you getting the twitches?
I'm getting the twitches because the last pool we had a couple of promising prospects.
I saw the one you sent me.
Yeah, so they're obviously bachelor grouped up right now. Kind of think I know where they're at. I think I have an idea where, what might be the stud of the group or the boss of the clan. I think I have an idea where he may be betting. Just want to kind of go back. I'm not going to do like any crazy scouting, of course, but I think I have a general idea. But I really just want to see how much more growth they've put on in the past month. Because what I had seen at the beginning of July was looking pretty good, and I was kind of projecting forward, and it was like, man, if he continues at the rate that he was moving at, at the beginning of July, then I might have something pretty nice to try to chase around down there this year. So
look out.
Yeah, looking forward to that. But I think at this point, I think we can go ahead and that's all the updates I have. So we could probably go ahead and get Jerry on the line, unless there's anything else you want to add. I'm looking forward to talking to him because I don't know if you've predator hunted in the past, but I've not. I had a little bit of a pre-screening call with him yesterday. The dude really knows his stuff. He's a Pennsylvania boy as well, which is nice.
Nice. I think the only predator hunting I've done is an angry groundhog.
Yeah, that's probably about the extent of mine too. And we do have some Coyotes at the farm, which would be nice to try to take care of. So, looking forward to talking to him. Hopefully, he can point me in the right direction, at least that I can get started and maybe extend my hunting season a little bit. After deer season, can turn my attention to some predators. So
that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, exactly. So,
by the way, I do have a piece of news. So I sent the picture when I got it, but I am set for the farm. A little doe tag action.
Oh yeah, nice.
Remember that? Yeah. Did you get yours yet?
It didn't come before I left for vacation, so I don't.
There's a little present waiting for you.
Yeah, hopefully. All the floors are being redone in our place while we're gone, so hopefully the mail didn't get thrown away. So,
or it didn't come through the mail slot and go underneath the floors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That'd be a new interesting way to make some tag soup, as if it is permanently placed underneath my floors.
Right.
So, all right, cool. Without further ado, though, we'll go ahead and give Jerry a ring and learn about some predator hunting. All right, everyone, we're back, and we are now joined by Jerry Lannen from Predator Quest Hunting TV as a pro staff member. As I mentioned at the top, we're pretty excited to talk to Jerry. I don't have a whole lot of information or knowledge when it comes to predator hunting, and we had a little bit of a pre-screening call yesterday when he and I kind of just chatted a little bit. And selfishly, of course, I'm really looking forward to the information he can share with us today, because I think it may, in fact, help me out on my farm. And I'm sure that some of the listeners will find this conversation valuable as well. But first, how's it going, Jerry?
Good. How you guys doing?
Not too bad. Hanging in there. I'm on vacation down here in North Carolina, trying to beat the heat. But
so you're just rubbing it in at this point, okay?
Yeah, I'm trying to stay well hydrated with fine pilsners and trying to stay out of the sun. But otherwise, we're doing okay. I know yesterday you and I talked a little bit. I know you're a Pennsylvania boy, which makes me even that much more excited about the conversation, that we can bring some other Pennsylvania folks into the fold here. But for those of you who, or for the listeners who may not know who you are and what you do and where you're from and so forth, could you just give us a little bit of background about yourself, what you do, predator hunting, and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm Morrisville, Pennsylvania. It's in the center of PA. So. Got hooked up with the Predator Quest TV, which has been it's been great ever since. It's been about 6 months now. Everyone there is a great group of guys. So, but I've been predator hunting here for almost 20 years now, and it's good for me to say the coyote hunting's getting better, but it's bad to say that because no one wants a lot of coyotes, so I enjoy hunting them. So that's the downfall, I guess. People don't want a pile of coyotes. So, but other than that, I'm a corrections officer. My normal job is a corrections officer, and I spend most of the other time coyote hunting.
Nice. So how, when you and I talked a little bit, I know that you also do some deer hunting, and how was your 2015 season?
No, it was good. I tagged out. I got a 8-point and a doe, so it's pretty good here. I got an archery season. I was happy with that.
Nice. Yeah, that's better than mine. I basically sweated in a tree stand in November for the most part.
Yeah.
I did manage to take a doe, but it was I got more sweat than I filled tags. That was for sure. But so predator hunting, it's interesting because I grew up in PA, and I remember growing up as a kid. I didn't recall there being a ton of coyotes around. It wasn't until I moved away and lived in Florida for probably 10 years, and I came back, and of course there was a lot more coyotes in the area than I ever remembered. But so it was something that I'd never really thought of growing up as getting into. So I'm just curious. When I think of predator hunting, I always think of more Western states and guys getting into it because they obviously have different types of predators and so forth. So how did you get into predator hunting? What kind of spawned that?
I when I was 14, when I started hunting here when I was 12, I started hunting with the 30-30 for deer, and I grew up on a farm, and I was always hunting farm fields, and I had 30-30, and this the range on that's not very far. 150
right.
yards is you're pretty much max. Obviously you can shoot farther than that, but I was only 12 and I was always missing. And, so my parents told me they were going to get me a new deer rifle for Christmas. And, I told them, I said, I wanted something that I don't have to hold 2 foot high on to try to shoot that doe or whatever out in the field. Well, when I was 14, they got me a 7mm Magnum, which, I was just a little kid that had a big gun, but it was nice because
right.
You didn't have to hold high on anything. Well, they got that for me before deer season for Christmas. Well, me and my dad went out to a big chunk of game lands out called Black Shannon, and before rifle season, we were decided we're going to go out there and look around. Maybe that's where we're going to hunt at. We weren't 100% sure. Well, we walked probably 3/4 of a mile down into this big hollow, and my dad had this old PS Ult Coyote Fox call. It's an old company that they were probably one of the first ones that started making predator calls, and it sounds terrible. I when I hear it now, I'm like, I don't know how that thing even worked. But and we got down in there, and I had my new rifle, and Dad had I think he had his 30-06, and we walked down in there, and we just stopped, and we're standing there on the old logging road, and he just starts wailing on that old call, and it was only a couple minutes, and we see something running at us, and I'm like, what is that? Well, here was a coyote coming in, and we never heard of them. No one ever heard of coyotes around there. You heard a couple people seeing them, but you're like, you probably just saw somebody's dog or something.
Right.
But sure enough, that thing came up probably 40, 50 yards from us, and we were both in so much shock that what happened. We never even took our rifles off our shoulders. It saw us, turned around, and was gone. And I remember we're looking at each other and like, man, that was a coyote. But ever since then, that first initial seeing that thing come in just sparked the fire in me that it's terrible. I can't get rid of it now.
Well, so you kind of fell into coyote hunting backwards almost, right? It's kind of what it sounded like. Wow.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, when you do see them in the wild, if you get a chance to, it's because at least for me, they've been so scarce to see, live. It does kind of just make you stop and take pause for a second. You're used to seeing deer, turkeys, but predators are just such different creatures. I think that when I see them, it's they're kind of awe-inspiring for a moment. It's like whenever I see a bear in the woods, it's like I don't often see them, so when I do, it's kind of a big deal. It's for me, it's kind of the same with coyotes. Whenever I've only ever seen one live in the wild, and it definitely was like I had to take a double take because same thing as you just mentioned. I thought it was someone's dog, and then whenever I looked, I was like, that's a mangy looking dog. And and why is it in the middle of that field? So I know you're mentioning obviously coyotes in this area. Do you primarily hunt coyotes, or do you hunt other predators? And where in Pennsylvania or I guess are some of the better spots? And if you're hunting elsewhere, what are some of those other places that you're hunting?
I mainly hunt I hunt coyote, fox, and try to get after bobcats too. But their bobcats are pretty. I don't want to say they're scarce, but it's hard to get after them. You can get lucky and call them in, but I mainly hunt, I'll say within an hour and 20 minutes, like if you put a circle around where I live. You know, I don't travel very far. I hunt a lot of farmers and stuff will get a hold of me and say, hey, you know, I've been hearing coyotes, I've been seeing coyotes, and, you know, come down here and get rid of them for me.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't travel overly far. You know, I've never been out west hunting them. I'd like to make a trip out there, you know, just to see how it differs between here and out there, and, you know.
You know what's interesting, Jerry, about that, you know, having farmers reach out to you and say, hey, we have some coyotes running around, you know, need to take care of them, is I don't have anybody reaching out to me saying, hey, I got this 10-pointer that's really eating these shrubs. You need to come take care of it.
See, if you start coyote hunting and you get in there and you do a good job, then maybe they'll get a hold. Hey, you know what? You did all right. You want to, you know, you're more welcome to go out here and do some hunting if you want.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Right.
Kind of weasel your way in there a little bit, you know.
I like the sounds of that. So with the predator hunting, you were mentioning the farmers are getting a hold of you. Now, I'm sure a lot of these farmers, you know, are obviously looking to make sure that their livestock is safe and so forth, especially if they're, you know, having a lot of young calves, you know, during the spring or what have you. But, you know, do you ever have folks, you know, who are managing specifically for deer give you a call in, and can you, I guess, do you have any, even if you don't have any scientific, you know, data, like evidence that would say, yeah, that it's, you know, we went in and we removed this many coyotes and we saw this kind of increase in their fawn recruitment or what have you on this farm. But I'm sure that you can just, as many years as you've been doing this, I'm sure that you just have some, you know, anecdotal evidence of how predator hunting on a farm helps doe recruitment and helps the deer herd. Can you talk any to that?
Yeah. Yep. The one guy here owns a good pile of ground, and he manages that whole thing for whitetail, and he has some big deer in there. You know, I've gone in there a couple of times this year at night hunting, and whenever I walk into the field, I always sneak in and like shine the light, because you never know, you might catch a coyote out in the field. But there's a couple of times it looks like there's elk out there. You know what I mean? I'm like, holy shit.
Wow.
You know, but a little bit like information about coyotes is you have to, in areas that are holding coyotes, you have to kill 70% of the population to keep this population the same for next year.
Wow.
Like, you can't, once they're there, it's a pain to try to get them out. I mean, you can try to take them out by calling them. I mean, they have people come in and trap, you know, and sometimes just by going in there and keep messing with them, you get them to move out of that area. So either, you know, if the farmer or the guy managing the land wants the coyotes out of there, sure, I want to go in there and take them, get rid of them. But just by me going in there a couple times might kick them out of that area. I mean, they're probably going to come back, but at least you're keeping them away. But they estimate like an average that a coyote kills 8 to 10 deer a year, fawns, you know. So I mean, if you do the math, I mean, if you got 6 coyotes on your ground, you're looking at, you know, maybe 48 to 50 deer, you know, give or take. I mean, it's not exactly, but it doesn't take long for that to add up. Right. So so you really want to do your part and try to get them out of there. You know, especially if you're managing for whitetails or however, you know, whatever you're doing for your ground, and that's not including the turkeys and everything else that they you know, that they'll get, or small game and everything. And the downside to managing for whitetails is it's a great thing and it makes for great hunting, but it also that's where all the food source is, so that's going to bring your predators in. That's what makes a hard line to follow, because you want to do good for your whitetails, but it also is making a nice buffet for the coyotes, because your food plots, your cornfields, that's going to bring in your rabbits and your squirrels and your turkeys. And, you know what I mean? It's kind of just setting up like a buffet for them.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it sounds like it almost sounds like, you know, to me, it's like if you're doing any type of whitetail, you know, management or quality deer management, it almost sounds like predator hunting almost has to be a component of that at some point.
Oh, yep, exactly. You know, eventually they're going to start getting overrun, you know, in there.
Right. And so for me, that's kind of where, I guess, where this becomes a bit of a selfish podcast, because we've been kind of working on the farm, doing exactly what you're saying. We've been putting in food plots, we've been building some habitat and so forth. And we've always had good numbers at our farm. I can honestly say that we're starting to see a little bit better in terms of bone growth on the farm this year. Last year was the first year that we really kind of started focusing on habitat improvement, and this year we're seeing some benefits from it already, albeit not astronomical, but we're baby steps. And the one thing I'm noticing is I'm definitely starting to see more coyotes, catching them a lot more on game camera than I ever have in the past. So for me, it's like I wanted to start thinking about predator hunting just from the quality deer management side of things, to make sure that my fawn recruitment isn't dropping based on how much predation I could potentially have on our farm. So for me, as a guy who's starting out, because I'm going to assume there are some folks out there listening that probably have some similar issues, if I'm starting out, just getting interested in predator hunting, what are some tips you could give a beginner from, as far down the line as, what type of rifle and glass should you be using that would maybe work the best for you, outside of maybe the deer rifle that you potentially already own, to the calls and stuff like that you would suggest, for a beginner?
I would, if you're just going in to manage your coyotes to get them out of the area, I would, and you don't want to spend the money on a rifle, I would just use your deer rifle, if you're just more concerned on getting rid of them. But I use 243. It's a good all-around caliber. It's a little heavy for foxes, but it's great for coyotes. I bet the 22, 250, even 223, they'll all do the work. But I do a lot of daytime and nighttime hunting. Okay. So I have to meet the middle between, I need a good scope at night that picks up light, and also a good one during the day, Right. And I've used a bunch of different scopes. You'll see one or you'll hear about one, somebody saying, "Oh, this one's really good." I'm happy with both ways of nighttime and daytime hunting. But the Burris Predator Quest series scopes that the Predator Quest has come out with, I have a 3 to 9 by 40, and that's honestly probably one of the best scopes I've looked through. I'm not just saying that because I'm part of the I'm on the pro staff. It's actually a very, very good scope at night and at daytime, crystal clear. So I would highly recommend that. Even if I wasn't on their staff, I would actually recommend that scope, because I've been very impressed with it. And I mean, as long as you keep a bigger bell on it, 40 millimeter to 50 millimeter, where it's going to collect light at night, that's pretty much what all you need. But as far as calling and stuff, I use a lot of hand calls. I also use electronic calls, because there's times that I don't have a lot of time to where I can pick and choose where I want to hunt because of the wind direction. So if I go into an area that I can't get the wind right for using hand calls, obviously I'm going to use an electronic call, and I'll stick it out so I can get the wind right. So that way I'm still able to hunt that area. Right. But you never want to just a simple howl, like a lonesome howl or interrogation howl, which is the same thing. Is people overlook the power of just a simple howl and what it does to a coyote's mind. Really? It's like, say you walk outside your house and you have a neighbor a couple houses down, and he's outside. You talk to him, but you don't really hang out much with him. But when you walk outside, you see him and you just yell, "Hey," really loud. He looks down, he might say, "Hey," back to you and wave, right. Or he might say, "Hey, all right, I got to talk to him." So he knows you're outside, so he's going to come over and talk to you. And that's the kind of the same principle as doing a lonesome howl. Is you're just out there and you're letting all the coyotes know that, all right, there's another coyote over here. They may, like that guy, they might howl back just saying hi, or they might come in and be like, all right, I don't want this guy on my turf, or I want to go see what he's up to on my ground. You know what I mean? Right. So that just that simple howl or two to start your set off is, that ups your odds of calling a coyote in quite a bit. Now,
is that something you would use to try to call them in as like a strategy, or is that really what you just mentioned, like your setup call before you get into making any type of distress calls?
So see, I'll do that first. That's part of my call-in sequence. That's usually 98% of the time. That's the very first thing that I do.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll even use two different calls, and I'll make a howl on one hand call, and I'll howl on a different one. That way, you sound like two coyotes in there. Sometimes that's enough to get them to come take a look at you. Mm-hmm. But once you do that and give it a couple minutes, let that howl sink into their head that, all right, there's a coyote over there. Then you start into your fawn distress, your rabbit distress. Now they've heard you howl, and now they're hearing something dying, so then it clicks in their head. All right, you're going to start to agitate them a little bit, because they're going to be like, all right, this coyote's on my ground, and now he's killing my rabbit or he's killing my deer. I'm going over there to get rid of him, or I'm going to come over to get whatever he has. Right. So you're also, the main thing the most luck that I have, the main thing I try to do is I try to get into that coyote's head right off the bat that, that, okay, there's something going on over here. I heard a coyote. I hear this, That's your main objective.
The main objective is just to get into their head, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, are there different types of calls that you'll break out for different times of the year? So, like, for deer hunters, it's like early in the season. Depending on where you're at, I know Pennsylvania, it's kind of tough. For deer, they don't respond just because the sex ratios often aren't in balance on properties to do this. But at the beginning of the year, in theory, if you're in the Midwest, you might want to use a soft grunt, and as you get later into the season, you might want to be a little bit more aggressive. And then when you get toward like that rut time, it's like in the Midwest, some states you can really have a lot of success rattling, and getting aggressive with that. So, with that in mind, is there something similar that goes on in predator hunting where you can different times of year really kind of necessitate different types of call or different aggressiveness of calls?
Yeah. I mean, in the springtime, like I hunt year round, but
right.
Once the springtime gets here, and they start having they have their pups, they have their denning area. They're very, very territorial. Mm-hmm. They don't want any other coyotes in there eating their animals. They're whatever they're going to be eating. So that's where that howl comes into play. Also, with them wanting to kick you out of there. They're going to come in. And in the springtime, I try to go in the springtime. There's a huge amount of food for coyotes. So you got your rabbits, your squirrels, your fawns, your big turkeys, your little turkeys. The grasshoppers. They eat a lot of berries. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to call a lot of them in on food sounds because they don't need it. They're usually full. Right. So I do a lot more howling, and I'll throw in some fawn distress because that's the perfect time of year in the spring for when the fawns start dropping.
Right.
And then I'll switch to doing like coyote pup distress, where the maternal instinct kicks in and they want to come in and save that. Their pup, or they don't know if it's their pup or if it's another pup. It doesn't seem like it doesn't matter. They still want to come in and check it out. But I'll run that the whole way through. Like I was out last night and hunting, and I mean I'm still running that. But once in the fall and then once the colder weather starts hitting, I'll do more. I'll obviously howl off the get go, but I'll do a lot more prey sounds for a longer period because once the snow starts falling, then the food sources are dwindling down. You're going to go after their stomach more, I guess you want to say, because they're going to be hungrier than they are right now.
Right. So their food sources almost kind of parallel or match a whitetail's food sources, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which is interesting. So, we're talking about calls, and you kind of covered off on what type of glass you like to use, and the different types of calls you might want to employ during the different types of season. Are there any, as you're scouting an area or you're getting ready to figure out how you're going to set up, are there certain topographic features that are going to be better than others for hunting predators or different types of predator species? And and in those topographic features, are there different types of sign that you're looking for that they'll lay down along a field edge versus on a ridge or whatever the case might be? Can you kind of talk a little bit about how topography might play a role in how you approach predator hunting?
Yeah, the majority of the coyotes during the daytime, I find that they are in like hollows. They'll be halfway, 3/4 way up one side of the hollow, or, you know. So, and if I'm hunting in the daytime, I usually stay away from fields. I go right in the woods after them, you know, and I try to set up and once you do it a couple times and, you know, you can get them to howl. The last couple of years, it's really picked up of getting them to howl in the daytime. You know, 5, 6 years ago, you couldn't, it didn't matter what you did, you could hardly get them to howl. And now you go out there and do a couple howls, and then they'll start howling back at you. Wow. So then which is great, because that's telling you exactly where they're at. Right. And where they're, you know, how you want to call it, their core area, where they spend the majority of their daytime hours. So I look for rocky, you know, hillsides or hollows. It seems like the best place to find them. And at nighttime, I try to hit, if I know these coyotes are staying in this hollow, I try to hit fields that are the closest fields that I can to that. That way I know I have a better chance of them hearing my calling, because you can't. It's really hard to hunt them in the woods at night. I mean, with the trees, and it's a pain to try to do that, because you just can't see good enough as you can out in the field at night.
Right.
But the other thing is, you could go out and you know, it's a coyote. They don't have much to worry about. I mean, they could lay down wherever they want to. So I mean, you can go out to the flattest piece of woods that you got and call a coyote in. But you know, most of the time they're in a hollow or a rocky hillside that I found out over the years.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, because I know, you know, again, on our farm, it's like when I do hear howling, it's definitely on the side of the mountain that's behind the farm is where I usually hear most of the howling. Which is kind of that terrain you're talking about. It's a little thicker, rocky, which would definitely be a challenge to find and kill them there. In all the pictures I've had of them, I've never really had them come along field edges or anything like that. So I think that the folks, or the ones we have at the farm, are acting exactly as you're suggesting.
Yeah, the coyotes here they're the same as the coyotes out west. I don't want to put a difference between them. A coyote, it's coyote. They're going to, you know, if they all think the same, they're going to react. I don't say they're going to react the same, but the same sounds are going to kill eastern coyotes versus western coyotes, you know. But right. Where you hunt them is completely opposite. And I think that's where a lot of new people, or even people who have a couple of years in parlor hunting, I think that's where they make one of their biggest mistakes of, I'm going to go to this field and call, you know, at daylight. Well, the coyotes aren't going to be there. Then the chances of calling one to that field and it actually coming out and showing itself is pretty slim. You know, like out west, they don't have much woods like we have. Right. You know, so they're going to find a little piece of woods, but they're a lot more comfortable coming out into the open. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you're going to have a better chance of calling into a bigger field. And I mean, you're going to see them coming in from 700,000 yards out. We're here calling in the woods. The last 3 coyotes I've called in, by the time I've seen them, they were already within 50 yards of me. Oh, you know what I mean? So it's a whole, I mean, you got to be pretty much ready. As soon as you hit a call, you got to be pretty much staring down your scope. You know what I mean? Right. They can show up quick.
Yeah, you're not going to have a whole lot of. They're not going to give you a whole lot of opportunity to say, "Hey, here I am, watch me."
Yeah, here I come. You know?
Yeah. So you mentioned something there just a second ago, and it's funny because it was the perfect segue. Because the next thing I wanted to kind of ask you was, you know, you mentioned that one of the biggest mistakes people make is where they're hunting coyotes as a beginner, even if they're a couple years in. So what are some, like, if you had to categorize like the top 5 mistakes that you see new people make, that if they would just, you know, cut down on those 5 mistakes, they'd probably see their predator hunting success go up? What are those top 5 things in your mind?
Obviously, the main thing is you have to be where the coyotes are. That's right. Plain and simple. And, you know, I fell into that category for probably, I want to say 10 years. Mm-hmm. You know, I knew there was coyotes in the area, but I wouldn't pay enough attention to where they actually were. Mm-hmm. You know, so I'd be like, all right, I'm going to go into this field and call. Well, I wouldn't have any luck. Right. Or, you know, you'd start calling and they would start howling, but they're a good ways away. So you're like, oh, all right, they can hear me. But the things you have to factor in is that coyotes have boundary lines that they won't cross, and their areas, they can be big, they can be small, depending on the food sources. If they have a lot of food in that area, their area, their home range doesn't have to be that big. So, but you might be calling to where you're calling from might not be their, that might not be their ground, So they're going to answer you, they're going to do their normal stuff, but they're not going to commit to your calling, But you might get whoever's area that is to come in, but they might be a long ways off also. So you need to, the best thing that I could tell you is know exactly where your coyotes are. Try your best to find their core area, and then go off of that. Because I'll try to break it down like it easy. I'll make it like a human way. Say I come to your ground, and I know you frequent this area back, the back section of your property quite a bit, but you're not there all the time. But I go in there and I just stand there and I start yelling free bacon.
Right.
Everybody
likes
might,
bacon.
Got me.
Yeah. you might hear me. You might not hear me.
Right. 9
times out of 10, you're probably not going to be back that far to hear me. Mm-hmm. So if I might get lucky. You might be back there checking the trail camera and you hear free bacon. Oh, I'm going over here. But if I sneak in to this, say you have a house there, and I get into your house and I'm in your kitchen, and I yell free bacon, you're going to be like, whew, man, I'm there.
Right.
So that's the same thing as setting up. You can set up in their home range and still not have luck, but if you can get into their close to their core area, you don't have to call as much, you don't have to call as loud, and their guard's going to be down a lot more to where they don't have to, they're not going to try to circle downwind as much because they feel so safe in their home, their
right.
house, I guess, if you want to call it.
So how do I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was finished there.
Oh, okay. So I was going to say, how do you? So all that makes sense, and it makes absolute sense. Where it's like you kind of wonder why people wouldn't think of it, but how do you define what their core area is? Like, how do you, again, like I'll relate it to something that I'm most familiar with, which is deer hunting. It's like I can kind of go in, and if I see a fallen tree that looks like it would be a good buck bed or whatever, and then I see a staging area around there with a bunch of scrapes and stuff like that, it's like I can make a pretty good assumption, like, okay, this is probably this guy's bedroom. Then in his core area, we'll go out, so many acres around that, essentially, right? It will be like his home turf. How do you go about identifying that whenever it comes to coyotes, understanding where their bedroom is and what might define their core area?
A lot of that just comes from hunting that area.
Mm-hmm. Is there any signs specific to their core area that you would pick up on?
Oh, you're going to see a lot more tracks, a lot more scat, but a lot of that bases off of hunting them in the mornings and getting them to howl. You do that 2 or 3 times, and you're like, all right, they keep howling from that same spot.
Okay.
So that's how I,
right.
really
so in a sense,
where they're staying.
Right. So in a sense, it's like that initial howling sequence. Like if you go to a new farm, right? Say I called you up and said, "Hey Jerry, I got coyotes down at my farm that I need someone to help me take care of." That first howling sequence you would do, not only is kind of like, that first sequence that you like to set up with, but it might be how you kind of start to determine where they're living, so you can basically start to map your plan for future hunts in that area. Does that sound correct?
Yep, that's 100% right. I mean, you're hunting and scouting. It's
right.
Like whitetails, you can you have trail. I mean, you could use trail cameras for coyotes, but you're going to be, I think you're going to be wasting a lot more time than actually getting in there, making stands, and learning that area as you're hunting it, And the downfall of that is, last night I went out to a new farm. I hunted the farm years ago, but the guy got a hold of me, and it's a beef farm, and he's been hearing the coyotes, seeing the coyotes, and he doesn't want them stressing his cows out.
Right.
So where I used to have luck there, where the coyotes used to stay, I went and set up there because I thought, all right, this is where I used to set up, Well, here they're not in there anymore. They moved. They were about, I don't know, 800 yards farther away. Well, I set up completely wrong, and once I got them to howl and everything, I'm not moving, because as soon as you stand up to move, that's when one's gonna be standing there looking at you. It seems like.
Right.
So, but that turned into over an hour long set where we were howling back and forth, and I just threw the kitchen sink at them. Everything that I knew how to do, every sound, I just couldn't get them to budge. When I finally hit some like higher pitched challenge howls, and I got two of them, I saw two sets of eyes coming, and so I set up wrong. There's a little hollow in the field where I couldn't see the bottom of it, and they come away probably 300 yards across that field. And I'm sitting there, they went out of sight, and I'm like, they got to be popping up here sometime. And I sat there for another 20 minutes and never saw them. So apparently, just by setting up wrong is another big thing. I mean, you got to set up right also to, and the only way you're going to learn that is over years of doing it. Like that was a mistake. I learned from my mistake. I know, I'm kicking myself in the butt. Like I couldn't sleep last night, and I'm still mad at myself for, not getting at least one limb out of there for them.
Right. Yeah. It's something how how hunting like that. Those small mistakes. Number one, kind of doom you. Number two, how badly it eats you up. I can completely understand the sleepless nights.
It's quite the feeling.
I was mad walking back to my truck. I was just like, you're so stupid. Blah, blah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. There's been days in the tree stand where I felt like I just wanted to throw my bow out of the tree. I thought I might have better luck hitting something by throwing my bow, but so talking. We covered a bunch of stuff here. All really good information. I'm getting quite the education here on my end, Phil. I don't know about you. You feeling pretty educated here?
Yeah, this is I think kind of like it is. It's quite the education. A little mind blowing because I think at first glance it seems like, oh man, this is going to be easy. I get a gun, I get some calls, I go out, and bang, it's going to happen. But the more that I think about it, and I think it's that much truer. I think a lot of other people that are potentially listening should think about it too. Like it's really about getting out there and spending time out there. I don't think you can just go out there. It's same like deer. You can't just go out there and be lucky all the time. And most times you're going to strike out. But it's about putting the time in and understanding. The movements, understanding the mindsets. But I do like how it is kind of a mind game to a point. One of the things that in previous podcasts I've kind of hinted at is I'm really an advocate of going from field to table and understanding like how my family's eating, how I'm eating. And I was just wondering, I've never heard of eating coyotes before, but is that a viable food source?
You could probably eat it. I wouldn't.
Hey, I don't know. I'm learning right now. So
I watched the TV. I don't know if you ever watched that TV show. It was called Meat Eaters with Steve Rinella.
Yeah.
They cooked.
We were actually just talking about him right before we jumped on.
Yeah.
They shot a coyote on there and ate it. And I wouldn't recommend it.
I bet it tastes like chicken.
Yeah, that's probably the other white meat, I'd imagine.
Right. Maybe we're missing out on a huge business opportunity. I don't know. We can start packaging it up and selling it somewhere.
Yeah, so not this guy. I know that.
Yeah. So actually, kind of on the same messaging. With coyotes, is it very similar with hunting foxes? Because where I hunt, which is probably about 2.5 hours east of where Clint and Jerry, where you hunt, I actually see more foxes than coyotes. So, would you essentially go after foxes within the same mindset? Obviously, not the howling perspective, but
yeah, kind of, and a little bit different. Once fox season comes in here in the end of October, I change my calling up a little bit. I'll start off with prey sounds.
Okay.
Because you still might run the chance of calling a coyote in, and if you're going after fox, you're going to call them in. I wish you could go out and hunt both of them, but you kind of got to break it down to, all right, I'm hunting coyotes. All right, I'm hunting fox.
Right.
You know, I mean, you can't really use the same tactics. I mean, most of the time a fox isn't going to come in after you did like a howling sequence because they're like, I'm not going in there. I'm going to get eaten.
Yeah,
you know.
So
yeah, but when I'll go in and make a normal fox stand where I'll run, you know, I'll do some prey distress, whether rabbit, bird, whatever, and then I'll usually try to do some type of gray fox pup distress towards the end of that. And I've actually had a handful of coyotes come in during that sound.
Oh wow!
You know, I think it's they want to come in and get rid of that fox because it's a competitor for their food.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of that, that's when I will howl. And if I get the coyotes to start howling back, depending on how close they are, I will either keep the stand going from there, or I'll pull my phone. Everyone has an iPhone. Pull it out, pull up a map, and look and be like, all right, I can get to this field, and I'll just move on them. You know. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
But it's that's kind of, you know, the way I changed up a little bit. But if I'm in a coyote hunt or something like that, it's the same sequence. I mean, I start off with howls all throughout the year, and I try to do like a female howl, which it's like a little higher pitched, pretty much, I guess you want to say.
Okay.
And because it's not as abrupt, I guess, or however you want to say it about. You know, they're more likely to be easier, or, you know, it's like a girl telling you hi instead of a big burly man coming in and saying, hey, how you doing? You know what I mean? You're not going to be as intimidated, I guess, would be the best way to put it.
Sure.
Cool. So you mentioned fox season comes in October, which there was you know, something I wanted to ask you. Two things actually you mentioned there was, one, is there a better time of year than others to hunt predators, be it fox or coyote? And then when you'd mentioned, you know, doing a female call, is there a type of, you know, is there a time of year where coyotes specifically are breeding, where they'll react more to like mating calls, much like, you know, how we work deer in terms of during the rut time, or the peak of the rut?
Yep, it's the same thing. You know, I mean, it's you know, obviously the coyotes have their breeding season, and then it's the same as the rut. But you're going to have, instead of the males running around trying to breed every female, they'll mainly they usually stick with their own. You know what I mean? You'll have pairs, but it doesn't mean you can't call that. You might have a male out there that doesn't have a female, so he's running around looking like you'd have, you know, your bucks running around the ridges trying to find a hot doe. So, and that time of year, I do a lot of female howls, and that's actually the name for it's female invitational howl, and which is a lot of higher pitched howls and more of a closer sequence of how, you know, I mean, like not I won't say nonstop, but a lot more howling than what you'd normally do. And all that is saying, it's almost like you turning over the Primo's can call. You know, all right, I'm over here, I'm looking for a man, and a lot of time you'll get them to show up. But the funny part about that is I've called a lot of females in with that, you know, so I don't know if they're coming in because they have a man and they're want to kick you out of the ground. So the male coyote doesn't leave her and go to that one.
Right.
So, and they also do what's called like whimpers, and they do that while they're breeding. Mm-hmm. You know, it's without a call or anything. I mean, you can get on the internet and YouTube and type in like coyote whimpers, and you can get a good idea of what it sounds like. And, you know, end of February, March and stuff, that's when I'll start doing that, when the breeding season starts kicking off.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I definitely, like I just mentioned, like this is a whole new world for me. I feel like I got quite the education. I know we took up a lot of your Saturday morning here, so we'll I have one more question for you, and then we can go ahead and wrap it up and get you on back to your enjoying your weekend. But what I would like to do, if you could, is just take a memorable hunt, you know, from getting out of the truck to like the kill, or even if there's not a kill, like that, you know, the pinnacle moment of the hunt. And it can be coyote, it can be deer or whatever, but just kind of give us a day of field with Jerry Lannen, if you would.
Well, this is going to be about 2.5 weeks ago. I had a guy get a hold of me from up here that he sent me the sirens, a fire whistle went off in the morning, and he works up there, and he was outside, and he sent me a video from his phone of coyotes howling down in this hollow, which that's great for me. I could just sit there and watch it all day because I think I'm a little bit crazy when it comes to coyotes. But
right.
He said, "Why don't you get up here and get these?" And I'm like, "All right." Well, I always, with areas like that, I always pull it up on the phone, like a map and stuff, and I'll look at it, and I'll try to figure out from that video. I figured out where those coyotes were kind of howling from. But anyway, I got in there, and it's a new area, and I got in there, and I'm trying to find a place to set up, and I took the rifle, which I wish I'd have took a shotgun, but there was just no place set up where it wasn't close quarters. And so anyway, I picked the best spot that I do, and I'm trying to sneak around, trying to find better places, and I'm like, man, I guess I just got to get set up here before I booger these things up, because I spent a half an hour walking around trying to find the best spot to sit. So I got set up, and there was an old logging road, and where the cows were howling, that was probably 350 yards from me, straight across on this hillside. So I got set up, and I did some howling, and I didn't hear anything. And I'm like, oh, man, I know they're there. So, but anyway, I switched over, and I started doing, like, fawn distress. And I ran that for about 5-6 minutes or so. And I stopped, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, I know these things are here. Well, when you know it, like 15 yards from me, this coyote jumps out of the brush, crosses the road, and comes up. I was just sitting about 5 yards off the right side of the road, and it was like an older, overgrown field that was probably only 40 yards wide by 60, 70 yards long, but it was a terrible setup. But that coyote jumped through and come up in front of me, and I could never get a shot at it. And I'm like, how can you have a coyote at 15 yards and not kill it? And I'm sitting there getting mad at myself, and I'm like, I just blew it. Like, I can't stand. It's so hard here to get one that whenever I blow a stand like that, I get mad at myself. Like last night, you know what I mean? You have to try so hard to make it happen. Well, I thought, all right, it didn't see me, it didn't smell me. I switched over, started doing pump distress, and about 30 seconds into that, probably 45, 50 yards down the road, about as far as I could see, this coyote jumped out on the road. And it looked like an elephant. It's huge. And it's running right at me, and its eyes were bugging out. And I was still doing pump distress when it jumped out. And here it ended up being a big male, and it was 48 pounds.
Holy smokes.
Wow.
Well, this thing's running at me with its eyes bugged out. It's mad. It's coming in to kick whatever's butt's hurting its pups. And I'm the one making that sound, so he's coming after me. And I'm like, one of the first times I got the pucker factor. You know what I mean?
Right.
Man, he's coming for me. Well, needless to say, he got up about 20 yards and jumped right in front of me. Like, I don't know what I barked at him to try to get him to stop because he was as close as I wanted him to get. And I don't know if it echoed somehow funny, but he jumped up in the weeds kind of like in front of me and looked away from me. And I dropped him right there. But I'm like, I got up and I was laughing because I'm like, you are a little wuss, because I was scared. You know what I mean? So, but like, just when that big coyote jumped out onto the road the first time, that image is burnt into my head. You know what I mean? Like, it's probably one of the scariest / funniest hunts that I've had. You know what I mean? Like sometimes like right now I'm smiling about it because I was. This stupid coyote scared the crap out of me because I thought it was going to come eat me.
Hey man, that's hunting though. I mean, if we can't do it and have a smile on our face, because I think sometimes I'm guilty of this. Taking it so seriously, trying to get something done, and whenever it doesn't work out, you get a little disappointed. But I think that story right there is a great example of any day in the woods when you come out, you should have a smile on your face and just be thankful you got to go do it.
Yeah, 100% there. Yep,
sure,
it's just a great time to be out there.
That's right. But I think with that, Phil, unless you have any other questions to further your education here, I think we can let Jerry have the rest of his Saturday back and finish up his coffee.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to digest a lot of everything that was spoken. So anything more, my head might explode.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jerry, I want to thank you for making time for us. I know this is early on a Saturday morning to get this done, but I appreciate it. I think the listeners are going to have a lot to, as Phil just mentioned, digest and chew on. And I'd love to have you back on here sometime later in the year and continue the conversation, talk about some deer hunting, some predator hunting, and just see what you've been up to.
Well, yeah, that would be great. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I can go all day talking predator hunting. I love it. You know what I mean? I love helping new people who don't know, even people who have been doing it for a couple of years. Maybe they're having a hard time or something. So that's something I enjoy doing, and I look forward to getting back with you guys and having another conversation about it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Jerry. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
All right. That's it for today's show. I just want to thank Jerry for joining us today. I learned a lot, I think, that I can put into practice at the farm here in the upcoming future, and hope that those of you listening found some nuggets of info that you would find helpful as well. If you'd like to follow Jerry and his hunts, you can find his Facebook page in the blog show notes. If you'd like to learn more about Predator Quest, you can find a link to their page as well in the show notes. As always, want to thank you listeners for continuing to download and subscribe to the podcast. As a reminder, you can subscribe through iTunes and Stitcher. If you're enjoying the podcast, it would be great if you could leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. That would be super helpful. And one last thing, we're going to start to include some listener stories on the podcast. And if you have an interesting story you'd like to share, please get a hold of me either on Facebook, or you can email me at clint@truthfromthestand.com and give me just a brief description of your hunt that you would like to share, and I'll start to contact some of you folks to get you involved in the show as well. So until next time, we'll see you.